one thing I want to add, when we were talking with Geraldine to set up this panel, all we wanted to bring people from different backgrounds. So we have someone from tech, somebody who has been in startup world, somebody who knows how to navigate this conversation, and somebody who has been advising a lot of companies. So we have the right panel here to find out what's the future. So as they are talking, think about how the future will be. If you are thinking about your talents, if you're in HR, just think about what's going to happen in the future. What are my pain points that I want to solve? And then these are the right folks to ask the question of how would you help me do that with AI? So without further ado.
Well, thanks everyone. Thanks Geraldine and thanks Ali Rose. Let's give them a hand. Bring this all together. So I've been around the Valley my entire life, San Francisco Bay Area and Kiku. Most of you, or many of you might know that I have a 9-year-old radio show called Silicon Valley Insider, but I came out of corporate, did that for too long. I have a lot of shared experience with our panelists. And then I also now do investment banking where I raise money for companies that are basically Series A and above. One thing I wanted to say is that if you've been listening to me or you've been in the know, first of all, I wanted to get a show of hands. Who would be actually in HR as a practitioner, talent management? Who's that? All right. Okay, that's good. And then who would be on the tech side of that? Who's actually supporting that function? Okay, all of it. All right, so it's good to get a baseline. So recall maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, the consulting firms McKinsey and Bain had said that within 5 to 10 and 10 to 15 years from that point, that AI and automation, they're very careful how they couch this, it would affect labor, either white collar, blue collar jobs by 80%. A lot of people interpreted that as losing jobs, which people still do. And then how many people remember maybe 7 years ago, I was working with IBM. IBM had made news that they were claiming to do performance management using AI. Okay, not very many people remember that. Last month, full circle, IBM announced they now have a product called Watson X that can do 94% of internal HR tasks. And IBM claimed that they had actually these politically correct terms like downsize or right size, that they had. Ryan, I'll probably ask you what the term is, but they had right sized about 8,000 people in their HR department.
What a shitty term.
So for those of us who've been around for a while, we don't use the terminology. So that's what we're here for to discuss today. We're going to spend about 25 minutes on the panel, and then we're going to have about 15 minutes of Q&A, and then the rest of us will be around for the rest of the evening to answer any questions. So with that, I'm going to kick it off with Lily. And you've been studying the future of work for years. Lily has a Ph.D. This is her life's work. And in the context of risk, and it's funny that we say the future of work because it kind of feels like we're here now. What are your thoughts on that?
We're always in the future of work. That's why it's fun to study, because it's like being one step ahead of what is going to happen next, which, for those of us who want a lot of control over the future, it is fun to be studying the future of work. But in order to really understand the future of work, we have to understand the past and the current situation that we're in. And right now we're in a very unique situation. We have been through the pandemic. We're at the tail end of that, but we're still experiencing effects. And during that time, there was a rapid growth in organizations and workforces, and then suddenly a rapid contraction. And I know that many of you have experienced the impacts of that in one way or another. But it created a dynamic where the economics of the experience of work have really shifted over the last few years. There's belt tightening in organizations, and employees are experiencing a lot of turmoil and general uncertainty about their futures within work. And HR leaders and talent leaders are bearing the brunt of that as well, because they have been, of course, at the forefront of all of this, having to cut people programs, also make really tough decisions about where to put money and energy, and also vilifying for having to carry this work out. And so we're experiencing, in addition, a contraction of people leaders being considered to be important to be at the table, right? So there's all these confluence events, And then AI comes in right at the right moment, and leaders who are experiencing all of these economic uncertainties are suddenly like, oh, this is a great solution for a lot of the economic woes that we're experiencing. And so AI's promise is that we'll be able to cut the money and the energy that goes into this type of work, and people are seeing that as an economic lever. The challenge, of course, is that as people race to adopt AI, we're leaving a little bit out of what makes HR and talent really important in the workplace, and that's that human connection. So when we think about some of the risks right now, we're seeing a lack of guardrails, we're seeing a depletion of trust in the workplace. We'll get more into this as we go, but those are some of the key areas that we're seeing that are kind of at risk right now. You probably all saw the work slop data that came out recently. We know that AI is not necessarily living up to its promise, but it could with the right dynamics and the right guardrails in place and the right approach to this as a human-centered process. So we'll probably get words, but I'll pause there so that you can move on to others.
Thanks.
So, started my career in tech in '98 in .com boom, right? And then followed by .com bust. So at one point I laid off more people than I'd hired, which is nothing something you ever want to do. It's not a whole lot of fun. Google, Slack, and now instead of running product and technology teams, actually advise leaders, largely in large enterprises. And there's sort of this bifurcated moment that we're having right now. And I think all of us need to understand that you can both be overhyped and underselling long-term impact, because I think a lot of enterprise leaders are stuck on one side or the other of that divide. I talk with Fortune 500 leaders all the time, especially in HR, that sit either in the world of this is actually going to revolutionize how we work and we need to get at it, or they sit in the this too shall pass, or I can wait 5 years to see what works and make it work. Neither of those is actually the case. When you read the IBM stuff, when you read, I'll pick on Mark Benioff, 50% of the work being done in Salesforce is now being done by AI. Dude, you've got 75,000, 85,000 employees. If 50% of the work was being done, I guarantee you would not still employ all of those people. So there's a difference between the hype machine that tech companies often are selling and what HR leaders are facing. They face a more fundamental set of challenges. They've had a rough 5 years. HR used to be a job that felt much more in some places like either compliance, my job is to actually make sure that we're following the rules, or it felt like enablement. Neither of those has actually been the case for the past 5 years. It's been emergency to emergency to emergency. It's been how do we deal with the pandemic? It's been how do we hire more people faster because we accidentally slowed down the machine, but it turns out the economy's still going good, to, oh my God, now we need to lay more people off. And in too many organizations, those same groups are siloed into separate functions. And so what you find is HR is, unfortunately, in some places, a bundle of tasks, right? It's all these different silos for recruiting versus performance management versus how do I actually create HR VPs that are capable. When if you want to build great employee experiences that actually create really excellent companies, you need to span across those. The AI revolution has the potential to upend how HR actually operates. It's not going to change how you operate overnight, but you have to start leaning into it now in order to tap that potential. You need to not fall into the trap of we're going to use this to displace massive amounts of workers. You need to instead start experimenting with it and iterating on it, because if you wait, you're going to wait too long, just like so many companies did during the .com boom and bust. So that's my take on it. We'll get much deeper.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lily and Brian, for really good insight. And I think that then leads to, Vishal, what you and your company are expertise on is that you set it up where there is a problem. Brian, I think it's good to put the human side to the HR side, where the cynics in the room would say that HR is there to protect the company's interests, which it is. Trust me, it is. But at the same time, there are humans, and they have empathy, and they're trying to do the best they can. And so this term that we've been looking at the last 2.5, 3 years with, say, ChatGPT, I know there's a lot of other elements, but that's really what was the clarifying moment for people in that these tools exist, tools that other people knew existed, but now you have direct access to. At this point, everyone's used it all on my hope, tried it. There are people who haven't. There are people who are very scared, so it's good. Have you felt like it solved all your problems? Has it like made you that much better in all your work? It hasn't, right? Oh, it has? Yeah. It has not, okay.
It has.
It has? Okay. Well, we'll get back to that closer to later part of the panel. We'll come back to you. This is why we're moving towards agentic AI. And who can actually explain the difference between like what we know as an LLM and what we know as an agent? And it could be anyone on the panel or you. Go ahead. What's your name?
Alex.
Alex.
Yeah, for me, Agentic is AI what has connection to tools, has interaction with outside world. Well, you have ChatGPT or something, but it only answering questions, but agent can do how Google search, look for files, analyze everything, and give you answer. That's what I understand.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you. So turning over to you, Vishal. Alex gave the explanation. What are you thinking in terms of where agentic AI is going? And it's a broad topic, but specifically in regards to HR.
Excellent question and great explanation of that difference. Not everyone kind of knows that nuance. And so people think of generative AI and mix it up with agents. And so what I'd add to that explanation is that agents, so LLMs are basically generative models, and it's something that you can converse with. You give it a prompt, it's going to give you something back. It's always going to give you something back. It's never going to tell you, I don't know. It's going to make something up if it doesn't know it. And so that's what LLMs do. Agents are a piece of software that use LLMs as the brain to have decision making. They have a goal. They use LLMs to break that goal down into smaller tasks. They're connected to other databases to get context and information, or the internet to go search for information to make the decision it's asked to make. And it's connected to actions like apps, as Alex was describing, to go take those actions, launch a campaign or send an email or do anything. And these agents will typically use LLMs in today's world for some of these tasks, but they can also use other techniques. They could use ML models, they could use fuzzy logic, they could use all kinds of different tools to execute different tasks. And so LLM models, agents that we build and deploy for enterprises, sometimes we'll swap out models depending on the task that it needs to do. The same agent might use Anthropic to write an email, but it might use OpenAI to do some deep decision making on some logic or diagnosis of a problem. So that's the difference between the two. In terms of what we're seeing personally is we deploy custom AI solutions for enterprises, and there's two types of adoption that we're seeing. One is a people-focused organizational adoption of AI, and then one is a more organizational adoption of AI. The people-focused one is something that's table stakes that I think everyone will have to do, enterprises will have to do, which is you have to arm your employees with basic AI tools that they can be more efficient and more productive. And that's like get your organization access to ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever that might be. And it's kind of like deploying your workforce without access to Microsoft Office or a spell check or something like that. You're going to figure out how to use it in your workflows, and there's some people here that seem to find use from it and some that don't. I think it's going to be up to everyone to learn how to be more productive with access to ChatGPT and Gemini. Whether we like it or not is kind of a separate issue. It's the competition is doing it, and so if you can be twice as productive with it, then that's what's going to be expected. And that's the people level adoption of AI. At an organizational level, though, C-suite and like CEOs and things like that, when they give everybody in their organization access to ChatGPT, sometimes they're expecting 10-20% efficiency out of it, and it doesn't work that way. You can't just give everyone ChatGPT and now expect you're going to have 10% less employees. They need to figure out how to be more productive and maybe have a better quality of life, that they can do 8 hours of work in 7 or 6 hours, but you're not going to be able to just fire people based on that. So there's the organizational level adoption of AI, and that's really where I spend time and where our company spends time. And so that is, there we're seeing adoption where there's a lot of high frequency tasks happening repetitively, constantly, that take a lot of time that humans generally don't like to do and require some level of context. And so things like coordination, or taking data from here and putting it there. Things like that is where we're seeing a lot of organizational level adoption of AI agents.
Thanks, Vishal. What I wanted to move to is for Brian and Lily is hearing the description and what you know of agentic AI. What would be one use case you could think that would really transform HR?
I'll give you one that's a little bit outside HR, because the HR has to play a role in it. Vishal and I were having this conversation before about, like, is it HR or is it IT that oversees this? The answer is, to my perspective, none of the above. HR has to enable in terms of training, in terms of capability, in terms of guardrails and guidelines. IT has to enable in terms of governance and sign off and control. It's the business unit leader, the functional leader within the team that actually is also owned, because most of the work we do doesn't happen, it happens for HR and HR, but most of the work happens inside of functions. So I actually did a case study on Zapier and what they did with their own customer service agents. So Lauren Franklin, who's the head of customer service at Zapier, actually thought about it the following way: yes, this is going to displace work, but we're a growing company. So she sat her team down and said, agents are going to make a massive difference in how we work, but it's going to help us scale. Your job and my job is to teach all of you new skills and how to work with these agents, on how to work and deepen your own capabilities. You're going to be given more complex work over time. Over the next year and a half, it's going to actually get dramatically more complex in terms of what's thrown at you. If you adapt to that, if you grow into that, if you're able to perform against that, not only will you have a job, you'll have new skills, and by the way, we're going to increase your compensation, God forbid. So they're able to stick with people and say, this isn't about layoffs. This is about your growth and our growth and what we can do together. She then not only said that, she backed it up. They actually increased people's compensation before they increased the demands on them, and she got into it herself. So HR had to be along for the ride, because someone had to buy into the fact that she was going to crank up people's compensation ahead of time. HR had to be along for the ride in terms of enabling them and providing the guidance. IT had to provide the tooling that went alongside this, and she had to actually put her hands on it herself. So she was in the work queue with her team every Monday morning for 2 to 3 hours, seeing what was working and what wasn't. So what works in this space is, how do you give people opportunity and not just, I need more efficiency, which people automatically translate in their other ear as layoffs, at which point you're going to get the heavy hand of go the heck away. So I think this is about what's HR's role in helping leaders understand that story, understand that you need to be able to point to outcomes. How are we going to grow this business? What is it that we're going to do together so that people see opportunity in adopting this? Because there is no top-down mandate to adopt AI that's ever going to work. It will just get resistance unless the leader on the ground is getting into it themselves and is able to point to opportunity for their team.
That's a great point. I think the enablement piece is really the promise of AI, the ability to enhance what workers are already good at, instead of replacing particular labor that they may have worked on for years and defined for years, and that's part of their careers. Automation is great in some respects, right? The example that you gave earlier about being able to answer benefits information very quickly, that you just don't want to keep over and over again having to answer how many vacation hours do I have. That's a really helpful aspect. But to me, the most helpful pieces are personalization. So AI's benefit is that it can create really personalized plans and information for you as an employee and also for HR. Think about learning and development. So if you are looking to enhance your skills and you have an array of courses at your fingertips, wouldn't you want something or someone to help you define and guide where you might go next, who else you should talk to, what else you should add to your repertoire? Those types of personalization aspects can be really helpful for helping people develop in the way that they need to develop. It also can center people who have learning skills that don't fit into the traditional mold of learning, who don't want to sit through an hour-long webinar or panel talk or whatever it is that they're doing to absorb information. Some people need more time to be able to do that. And so AI does offer that promise as well. The other side is, or not the other side, but another aspect is the ability to draw on patterns and to be able to analyze data in such a way that it can look at large, vast amounts of data and say, here's the important pieces to take from this, right? And then, of course, there are the caveats with all of that, that if you leave the humans out of the decision-making process, and that's really a line there, right, is that AI is great for surfacing issues, it's great for being able to enable you and you give it direction, Where we get into a sticky situation is when you're starting to listen to it telling you what to do. And that can be really problematic in the HR space for many reasons. And if you're a builder, being able to put some kind of guardrails around that will be really helpful for HR folks. But I think one of the areas where we're not really paying enough attention to with all of the development and deployment of AI is human psychology and how people are actually interacting with these particular things. And also, if you are not deploying a particular type of agent, let's say ChatGPT, people are using it anyway. We know that over 50% of folks are using Gen AI, even if their workplaces do not condone the use of Gen AI. And that's going to be a huge problem. In order to be able to make sure this stuff works effectively, we have to understand how people actually interact and communicate with Gen AI and what some of the challenges are. We saw the Work Swap article. We know that people are more likely to cheat with AI. That's new research that just came out last week. There's a diffusion of responsibility when you have something executing on your plans. That's a big question that will come up. Who's actually accountable for this stuff? So I know I'm raising more questions, but I think there's a lot of promise for it too.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of those moments that we use the analogy of the early days of the internet, early 90s, mid-90s, that the guardrails aren't in place yet, and that's something I talk a lot about. But and my children are in university and high school, and they said that 80% of all elite university students are using an LLM to keep up because of the competition. They don't cheat, but like in terms of augmenting the capabilities. And so this brings us to the final question here before we go to Q&A. But what are some of the personal recommendations, your own reflection on the do's and don'ts of using AI? Let's go down the line.
Sure. I think the biggest takeaway is really understanding your risk right now as an organization, as a leader, and as an employee. If we don't understand what our particular risk profile is when it comes to AI deployment and use, that's going to set us up for a lot of failures, right? And everybody's risk profile is very different. And let me just go through very quickly like what some of those risk factors might be. They are very much organizational. So do you have trust within your organization? Is leadership trusted? Do people have high confidence in leadership? We know 23% of people have trust in their leadership to deploy AI right now. That's really low. And that correlates with how much trust there is in general of your leadership. And so when you're looking at risk for AI, you should be looking at organizational factors like the ability to communicate, transparency, trust, and then understanding of how resilient your culture is. And I think once you get that full picture, then you can understand where to actually apply interventions to make sure that AI is deployed effectively and solve for the real things versus just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks. This is really the time to kind of double down on understanding your organizational concerns. And also, this is the time for anxious people to shine. If you're an anxious person, this is actually a good thing for your organization. You should be anxious about this stuff. And that doesn't mean you are not on the side of AI. It means that you want it to work and you're able to identify where some of the unique challenges are within your organization and actually help your leaders be able to employ it effectively.
So my views would be, I definitely agree, don't throw spaghetti at the wall. That's the best way to make sure that any AI use case does not go to production or scale. There's two things. One, pick an AI use case well, and two, understand what the value and feasibility is going to be at scale. So for the first one, when you choose something, make sure that it's something that's done repetitively, that's done frequently, that impacts a lot of bandwidth. If it's only going to save one person an hour of time a week, it's not going to have the business case to go do something like that. So make sure that it really has impact there. And pick use cases. When you do design the use case, make it such that you're augmenting human decision making when the outcomes are going to impact people. So when we talk about like hiring, firing, promoting, if we deploy HR use cases, recently I'm actively doing it, and no HR department is using AI for that. Even if it has recommendations, there will always be a human using all the calculations that the AI has come up with to then make a final decision. So it's just make sure that you rely on human decision making for things that impact people. And then on the second do, which is to do with feasibility, understand what that use case looks like at scale. How much value would you get if you deployed it across your organization? And think about the technical feasibility. And this is where I see some people not able to kind of accomplish this, because you need a little bit of technical understanding of how agents work or what LLMs are capable of. But try to partner with somebody to understand what is the feasibility of this use case. In order to first go and map out what are the decisions in this use case that I want AI to make. In each of those decisions, what information does the AI need to have to make the decision? A lot of people assume that because I have the information, the AI will too. That's not true. Where is the AI going to get that context in order to make that decision in your organization? And lastly, in order to take the actions for that use case, the tools that you need to connect to, whatever business apps you have, whether it's to change someone's status in Workday or whether it's to change somebody's comp somewhere, like, does that app have a way for AI to connect to it? Does it have APIs? Does it have an MCP server? And this gets a little technical, but you have to understand at a very surface level that AI is not a magic tool. It needs to connect to things to get context, and it needs to connect to things to get actions. So understand the technical feasibility and pick a use case that's frequent and augments your human decision making.
That's a really important set of points, both of you. Like, the outcomes generated, part of it, and the focus on a limited number of use cases really pays off, at least in the firms I've seen. Two things. One, leadership needs to get in with their teams and learning together. So I've seen this in a bunch of use cases. I've seen it in BCG research. I've seen it with women defining AI. If a leader most HR teams are rolling out training to people as, come and take our AI training as a company, which means every individual is expected to find the time to do it. Take the alternative approach. A manager with their team is going to say, hey, I'm going to carve out an hour every Tuesday for all of us to do this together, or I'm going to carve out half an hour every day for 3 weeks for all of us to get in there and do it together. You get 2x the adoption rate among teams, and you get rid of one major aspect, which is fear, that Lily touched on earlier. If people haven't had the conversation with their manager about what's working and what's not, they're extremely fearful, and even sharing the fact that they're using AI. 47% of people don't tell their boss because they're afraid that they'll be seen as a cheat at work. Okay? That's a major impediment. Second, the leader being in there with their team is going to show that maybe they don't know what they're doing yet either, and they're figuring it out. That invites people to try it out, which is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. You don't need to have the imposter syndrome around it. But it does another really important thing, which is it gets people working on it together and makes sure that leader knows what's not working, so they're not getting overhyped. Upwork has a piece of research that shows the deepest AI adopters are the ones that are least likely to believe that management's aspirations for AI are realistic. Okay? So leaders need to get in with their teams. The second is focus on toil. If you want a team to adopt some way of working that's different, focus on the parts of their job that suck. So we were talking about this earlier. If you are working with attorneys, they hate sending out invoices. They hate even more reminding their clients that they're behind on paying their invoices. If you can actually take care of that job for them, they'll be much happier. Turns out, on the other hand, if you tell nurses that we're going to automate the job of taking your notes for you, they're going to hate you. Because that 10 minutes of the hours when they get to get off of their feet and get to sit down and write out notes. So you need to understand what's toil and what's joy in someone's job if you actually want to get adoption to work. So leadership engagement and toil, not joy.
Thanks. And as we wrap up, because I'm reflecting on what all the panelists said, I have a client from my own firm on my consulting side that is a hospital, and even though the nurses like to do the note taking for 10 minutes, it's a high error rate. The high error rate means loss of federal funding or what have you. And so the leadership wants to automate the notes afterwards, because depending on how the nurse does or does not fill it out correctly has a direct impact to the bottom line. And that's what I want to talk about, because Lily is a risk expert. My final corporate career was managing technology risks for a major bank. And so all these things come up in banks all the time because all business is a risk. And so as I think about enterprises, as you are the leaders, they should decide on these tools. The thing is, just like we've always said, when you outsource, you can outsource the task, but you can't outsource the risk. And so Brian gave very practical steps that your team should be engaged. And on a personal level, 2 months ago, as we end, 2 months ago-ish, MIT and Harvard came out with their like 2-year study on usage of LLMs. Does anybody remember what the findings were? So people have been using LLMs for the last 2 years as like a chat tool. Cognitive function has gone down measurably by 70%. And so if you're using it,
It's making us dumber.
it can. However, if you are a challenger, if your personality is the type that challenges, like it's funny to say this, but if you actually converse with your chatbots, knowing that they're not human, but just challenging and pressure testing, cognitive ability in the same survey has gone up by 30 to 40%. So it's, don't use it as a crutch. Use it as an enabler, which is kind of the theme. We're going to open up for questions, but once again, I want to thank General Dean and Ali Reza for bringing us all together. I want to thank Lily, Brian, and Vishal as well. So we're going to open for Q&A, and I'll pass the mic around. And state your name and your question.
Sure. Hi, I'm Rachel. I work with Lily at ReadySet. Thanks for this. I think I've been to so many AI panels and this felt much more tangible than many of them I've been to, so thank you. Really agree with what you all said about sort of the tips for how we're going to continue to make this human-centered in your example of really getting in there, getting in the mix as a leadership with your teams. That being said, we know that when trust is at 23% and when we're living in this sort of capitalist dystopia that we're currently in, there is going to be a race to the bottom in many ways, and many organizations are going to be using AI as a way to do downsizing, but mass firings. So I'm curious, and this goes to the side a little bit, but what sort of the top priorities for you all from a public policy perspective when it comes to AI and HR specifically? Because we're in this weird place around compliance, and I'm curious what those top guardrails would be for you.
I'll start with just sharing what we're observing. I'm not going to directly answer the question because I think they're better qualified to talk about what it should be and what policy kind of might help this. But we deployed a lot of AI workforces, and every enterprise that we work with asks us various questions around compliance, and every time I go to contract and close a new deal, there's some new AI law that they're asking us, are you compliant with this? Are you compliant with this? And so almost every week we're trying to keep up with a new law in a new state or a new jurisdiction about something to do with AI. I know with hiring, firing in HR, if you're going, there's a lot of policy coming out around if you're going to make decisions with AI that impact people's employment, that you have to be transparent about it. So there's things like that in terms of policy. I mean, there could be policies. I could see a world where there's policy that you ultimately have to have human decision making on certain types of things, protected categories of tasks maybe. So that could be a direction it goes. But we see a lot of compliance things that we work through, so we can't just use AI to hire, fire people and do all kinds of things like that. So there are a lot of people thinking about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we've seen some policy improvements. California just came out with SB 53, requiring that AI projects be transparent about the types of guardrails that they're working with and report any kind of issues that are coming up. I think it is necessary, but it's not sufficient to solve this problem, right? To solve the broader problem of can we make this tech really safe and effective for people. It is important. I think about it as a container for enacting trust. We need to have containers that allow us to be both innovative and to have trustworthiness in our workplaces and with each other. And those kind of guardrails, those policy guardrails, act as one particular container. The other container is our workplace policies, and those have to also prioritize transparency and clarity. I mean, I would like to see policy, whether that is at the workplace level or at the government level, where we have to divulge whether AI is being used for decision-making processes. Right now, we have so much going on with hiring. We don't know who's using AI to determine whether our resumes are being seen on the market or not. That, to me, that feels like it could be a requirement, because transparency is one of the things that builds trust. And that trust is what gets us to adopt AI and effective AI. And we need to be able to enact that trust through those types of guardrails. And then of course, in the products themselves, right? Building those trust containers in are really important. We know that people interact with AI in a particular way. Right now, Gen AI like ChatGPT, it is designed to be very seductive because engagement is a key metric, it's a key goal for these products to get people to be engaged with them. It acts like a human, it speaks like a human, and we interact with it like a human. And there's all kinds of gray areas there with that, and that creates a lot of mess in terms of how we tend to overlook mistakes, how we get taken advantage of in certain respects, and how we might misuse it even to do our own unethical misdeeds. And I think we need to be able to build those checks into products, confidence intervals, things like citations being a requirement in facts and things like that. At the same time, we don't want to slow down innovation, right? And there's, of course, problems with all of these regulations getting this into the hands of people. So we need to look at it at that trifecta, all 3 points.
I'm going to give you maybe a slightly different answer. One, which is think globally, act locally. There's not a lot of policy that's going to come out US-wide that's going to do things to protect people's jobs. UBI is a bit of a pipe dream to be blunt. It's not something that's going to happen. It's certainly not in the current administration, certainly not what's going on in the world. I think it's actually incumbent on companies that they want to leverage this technology to think about what are the guardrails and guidelines that we want to put in place for ethical use, for how this helps us grow as a business, for how we're going to use it. That actually matters a lot because that actually drives adoption because it drives trust. And that actually is going to get you further than pretending it doesn't and thinking you can fire people and remove them. I don't know if you guys everybody saw the Yale Budget Lab study that came out last week. I actually believe it's pretty accurate. I wrote about, if you go to charterworks.com, I wrote an article today. Most of the job problems in the US today have nothing to do with AI. If you want to slow down the rollout of AI, the biggest thing you can do is roll back the tariffs. I hate to say it that way, but it's economic uncertainty that's actually created the US economy or done damage to it. The problem is, the one thing we want to avoid is a recession, because a recession is actually what causes people to automate more, not less. Companies, and I work with Fortune 500 companies all the time, are not going to do wickedly hard things when it comes to automating jobs unless the market takes a sizable downturn. This happened in manufacturing. If you look at the history of manufacturing in the US, the times it turned down were when we had recessions, and the jobs didn't come back afterwards because they got automated away. The biggest risk that we face right now from a jobs perspective is that a recession actually comes along, companies use that to further automate jobs using AI, and that what would normally be a decade-long set of changes that would be rough for everybody who goes through it, but would allow space for people to develop new skills and to get retrained, instead becomes a more sizable displacement in the short term. So number one is reskill your people. Alex Buter-Shapiro is Chief People Officer at Jasper AI, happens to have been my HR VP at Google, awesome human being. And her line for this is, we don't know what the weather's going to be, but we need to turn our employees into sailors so they can actually weather the storm coming forward. The more that you can do to upskill and provide the skills to your employees to learn, to develop new capabilities, the more they're going to be able to handle anything that goes your way. Think globally, but act globally.
All right, one more question.
Thanks. I'm Dylan Zawella. I'm an executive search consultant. What are your thoughts on that industry? And what are the pros and cons where AI gets over? Thank you.
Nice to meet you. I was writing about this recently because I got to tour the new LinkedIn, I think it's called Hire Assist or something like that, I can't remember. It's their new hiring platform, and it's being touted as a replacement for executive search. And I think it does certain things very well, right? It helps sift through thousands of applicants. It helps pick out which ones are going to be most likely to respond if you write to them. What it doesn't do is it doesn't create human connections, and it doesn't do the labor that is required to really understand whether someone is a good fit, and it doesn't develop that relationship to be able to keep them interested and coming back and want to work. And I don't think we're going to be able to replace that part. And so that's my short and sweet answer, is that I think that piece you cannot develop at the human level because AI is not human. And we really depend on those human relationships to really understand whether someone's a fit, and also to just keep them being interested and a part of that. So I think you're still good.
Michaela Smith, who hired me in the Slack, is still one of my heroes. And Michaela Smith figured it out not because she got my skill set right, because she got my fit right from a culture perspective. And she had helped me navigate learning and meeting all of Slack's executive team, including Stuart, who's a lovely human, but my God, the number of hours I spent before I got hired. There's a relationship development aspect to humans that I think is very hard to displace. I think we often fall into what's called the fallacy of the bundle of tasks. We think that a job is a bundle of tasks. We think that because IBM says that 94% of tasks can be done by AI, that a job can be done by AI. But there's a vast difference between those. I think that AI's got the potential to radically make you more productive, to help you reach more people, to help you handle all the crap in your job that sucks, whether it's invoicing your clients or whether it's the newsletter outreach. But it's not going to displace, especially, I don't think we're going to see the AI CEO anytime soon, because the human nature of what actually comes down to connection, empathy, and vision that comes out of a human standing in front of a crowd of people doing what we're all sitting here doing today.
Another question? Or one more?
Hello, Andres here. I have a kind of tough question. Let's be like real. Like in reality, like what are the leaders thinking about the automation versus maintenance of people? I work with several companies, but what's the reality? Which areas are they automating? Which areas they're not?
Why make me go first? CS has been customer service has been a target for automation for as long as I've been in business, which is 30 some odd years. And I think that's always been like the sort of low-hanging fruit. It's task-oriented. You can put a yardstick against it. You can measure it. So therefore, it shouldn't be easy to displace that with technology. You can offshore it. You can make it cheaper, blah, blah, blah. And if you look at what Klarna did, Klarna also figured out, oh, crap, we went too far. We didn't put a human in the loop. We didn't have a backstop. We didn't have a way in which an important customer of ours could find a human being to talk to say, I get your rules, but your bot is making me crazy. Right? And so I think there's a set of challenges there. I think we're also living in a world where increasingly you've got the difference between leaders who think that humans are cogs in a wheel to drive business, System X thinking, which says it's all about the sticks and the carrots. It's all about how do I monitor you to make sure that you're not malperforming? How do I reward you so you're maximizing performance? And system-wide thinkers, which says you have a unique set of desires and needs and motivations. How do I get the best out of you, given what I can learn about you? How do I get your mastery and autonomy and purpose-driven self to show up to work here each day? And so I think when it comes to AI, the people who are thinking harder about it are thinking about it from the perspective of how do I get that inner, capable human to use the tools to be what they could possibly be in their best selves, as opposed to how do I displace them? And y'all, I think CEOs are split 50-50 between those two camps.
I'm going to jump in too. Everyone knows the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, right? And there's another rule that doesn't actually have a name, but it's the 80-20, the 80-20, which is like 96-4, so 4% of the whatever resources people drive 96% of the outcome. So I can be blunt because I've been out of corporate for a while, and that the reality is that what I think we should all be, because you want to be blunt, right, is that 80% of tasks, 80% of like labor and work are tasks. When Meta and X say that, like, they had a layoff about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and they made a statement, we're laying off 10% of our workforce, but 100% of our mid-tier engineers. That tells you that they put very little value on code monkeys. because it's an entire corporation. It's a 10% layoff, but all of our mid-tier engineers. And so I think it's a time for everyone to reflect, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor or a middle manager, that you're not, because of automation, I think the reality is going to be a time where we cannot hide. You can't, I mean, everyone's who's working in corporate, you know that there's people who do more and people who do less. The people who are like skating by, there was an article that came out today that talked about how Google still has 600,000, they still have engineers mid-tier that are making 600,000 a year, or senior or perceived to be senior, because they want them off market. You know, that time is going to end very quickly, but that is kind of the messaging I would impart is, as I said, how do you upskill, how do you keep skills current, how do you stay human? Because I think a lot of what decisions we're making as a technologist is that when you think about blockchain and crypto, when you think about AI, people keep thinking that dehumanizing is the answer, because that's going to drive performance, drive better outcomes. And I don't believe in that. I say it all the time. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. I know we're almost at the hours. Any final parting thoughts?
My one aspect is so important. I think that this is maybe a hot take. If you look at which companies did DEI right, those are the companies that are probably also doing AI right, because those are folks who really took the time and the effort to integrate these programs deeply into their employee programs and systems. And those are the ones who did not necessarily pull all of those things back when they were scared in this new year. Those are the folks who are prioritizing employee experience and employee engagement and development as part of their AI process as well. I don't have any data to back this up, but I do have clients, and those clients who really leaned into that are also leaning into making sure they understand the challenges, are taking it slow with AI and really piloting things and making sure that they're focusing on enablement first. And I think if you're playing the long game as an organization, you're focusing on retention, which right now they don't have to do. As soon as the markets change though, all of these employees that are unhappy in workplaces will leave for better workplaces. And those who understand that long game are playing that right, and they're the ones who are focusing on enablement. So I will just leave you with that hot take.
I would just sort of second that. I worked in places where DEI was a performative thing as opposed to a real thing. The real thing is, I'm actually going to think about my talent advantage. My talent advantage is how do I actually build a merit-based system that, regardless of your race, gender, creed, background, where you came from, income level, what college you went to, I'm going to reward you on the basis of your capabilities and your skills. If you're really doing that, then you're thinking about this from like, what's my talent advantage standpoint? And we do the same thing with AI. I'm going to look at it and say, what's my talent advantage to actually upskill people, train people, because I know I'll get more out of them if I do that than if I simply sit there and say, y'all are on your own, figure it out, and we'll displace you with somebody else in the open market.
I'll just say one last thing, which is I don't think, given where technology is right now, in the near term or midterm, I don't think AI is going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI and does it well might. And so that's what I would focus on as an individual, is really just understanding how do I get more efficient using AI.
All right, well, thanks, Geraldine. Thanks, Elliott. Thank you, audience.
Thank you. That was such a refreshing panel. Thank you. Inspiring panel as well. And how much high performance relies always on the same thing, having the things right, from a leadership perspective, etc. And I wanted to thank you all for being here. I missed two things. First, saying thank you to the MENA Gallery team and to the MENA for hosting us tonight. So thank you so much. And it's a beautiful space. As you can see, they are open for happy hours on a regular basis. Just check out on their agenda which days they are open for happy hours. If you want to bring people, if you want to organize happy hours, you can do that. You can do that as well here. Yes, and thank you for Vishal for hosting us at MENA Gallery. And the other thing that I totally forgot is that Natalia, are you still here? Yeah. Natalia has has some books over there. So she's doing some career management support for people. She also just released a TEDx, and you're dying to talk.
Yes, just one thing. Do you want to change someone's life?
Yes.
Yes, you can change my life today. Because my talk just came out 8 hours ago, literally as we speak. And you know how YouTube works, right? I was waiting for this for like my whole life, and I'm almost 40 now. So just no pressure, but but you know how YouTube works. So first 24 hours is the most crucial, right? If there is no interaction with the video, then it dies out, right? And otherwise it gets pushed. So yeah. Having that said, I think it's a good talk. Anyways, you can check for yourself. Even if you hate it, just interact with it, okay? Just you can say it, but just do something, okay? So my books are there. Please grab one. If you like, this is for all job seekers. Whoever is looking for a job, this is just a very simple textbook, just from A to Z, whatever you need to do to get a job. So it's a very, very basic textbook. But next to that, you can also see a QR code to my talk. So I'll be very grateful for any interaction. Just you can roast me, whatever you say is good. You know, that's how YouTube works. So I'm waiting for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and don't forget to check all the LinkedIn profiles of all our speakers, because they are all influencers in their field, and the quality of the discussions that we have tonight gives you a sense of what learning we need to do to understand the big picture and to make the right choices at the entry level. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you.
One, two, and three. One more.